Gasps of surprise spread through the crowd of passengers as Janelle Brown, once the quiet backbone of the sister wives family, was spotted aboard a luxury cruise ship. Dressed simply, approachable as always, she carried herself with the calm poise of a woman who has weathered storms and finally chosen her own freedom. While some reality stars would have hidden behind sunglasses or retreated to private cabins, Janelle mingled with ordinary travelers, unafraid of being recognized, unafraid of whispers. Fans noticed her and reacted not with chaos, but with quiet admiration, some joking that if they staged a little drama in front of her, she would probably laugh instead of scold. This moment on the cruise encapsulates something powerful. Janelle has learned to live outside the suffocating shadows of the Brown family's dysfunction, while the rest remain entangled in a web of betrayal, hypocrisy, and unresolved wounds. The theme that now emerges from the world of sister wives is one of duality: freedom versus captivity, truth versus manipulation, survival versus collapse. On one side, Janelle, Christine, and their children are carving new paths, refusing to be silenced by Kody Brown's regime of control. On the other, the ghosts of that regime remain, exposing themselves through Christine's shocking memoir, where lies unravel and hidden cruelties are laid bare. What once looked like a story of faith and unity has curdled into a cautionary tale of gaslighting, favoritism, and emotional abandonment. Take Janelle's cruise as the first striking example. For decades, she played the role of stabilizer, working long hours, raising children, and helping build the financial base of a sprawling plural family while others basked in the spotlight. Caleb and Maddie were at her side as she worked tirelessly, while much of the Brown clan was left on the sidelines, either excluded or uninterested. Janelle rarely demanded recognition, rarely sought drama, yet her appearance on that cruise felt like a symbolic declaration. She is no longer chained to Kody's control or Robin's manipulations. She can step aboard a ship, surrounded by strangers, and be more at peace than she ever was in a household built on lies. But if Janelle's cruise signals quiet independence, Christine's memoir detonates like a bomb. Page after page strips away the carefully maintained Duggar-like facade that Kody and Robin tried to sell. One of the most damning revelations centers on the family's move to Flagstaff, pitched publicly as a decision for the children's well-being. The truth? It was orchestrated for Robin's benefit, a calculated maneuver that uprooted everyone else while dressing the act in false concern. This wasn't family unity. It was manipulation, pure and simple. Robin's desires disguised as divine inspiration, Kody's compliance cloaked as leadership. And then there are the moments of abandonment so raw, they leave readers in disbelief. When truly, Christine's daughter was gravely ill, Kody was nowhere near her bedside. Instead, he was at Robin's house, folding laundry as though domestic chores with his favorite wife outweighed the life of his sick child. The image is grotesque in its symbolism: a father choosing convenience over compassion, favoritism over fatherhood. This was not an isolated lapse, it was part of a pattern. Consider Isabel's spinal surgery, a moment when any father would be expected to rise above his flaws and stand by his daughter's side. Instead, Isabel faced her life-altering procedure without Kody's presence, abandoned by the man who claimed to be the patriarch of a vast family empire. Christine writes that this was not simply absence but betrayal, the ultimate exposure of Kody's selective loyalty. He was not a father to all, he was a father to some, and those who were not favored by Robin's circle were left to suffer in silence. Christine's coping mechanisms reveal the devastation this neglect caused. Struggling to shoulder the pain, she admits to turning to alcohol and substances, desperate to numb the relentless ache of rejection and despair. This is not the image of the smiling sister wife who once cooked meals for dozens, organized chaotic schedules, and pretended everything was fine on camera. This is the reality of a woman gaslit into believing her suffering was her fault, manipulated into silence, while Kody and Robyn built their empire of favoritism. The timeline of these betrayals tells a chilling story. Early sacrifices, long drives, cramped houses, constant relocations were justified as necessary for the family's future. As the years passed, those sacrifices always seemed to benefit Kody and Robyn most. By the time Christine reached her breaking point, that hypocrisy could no longer be ignored. Her memoir shows that what looked like plural marriage was in fact a hierarchy. Robyn at the top, Kody her enabler, and everyone else forced to accept scraps of attention and affection. What is most striking in all of this is the contrast between Janelle and Christine's trajectories. Janelle, practical and measured, quietly extracts herself, finding peace in simple joys like a cruise with her children. Christine, fiery and determined, chooses to detonate the truth with her book, refusing to let Kody's narrative stand unchallenged. Together, they represent two sides of survival, one through quiet reclamation, the other through open rebellion. Both paths, however, expose the same reality, that Kody Brown's leadership was never about love or faith, but about control, manipulation, and self-preservation. Fans and critics alike now see the Brown family not as a social experiment in modern plural marriage, but as a case study in dysfunction. Gaslighting was constant, problems were dismissed as imagination, favoritism was denied even as it unfolded in plain sight, hypocrisy was rampant, claims of equal love contradicted by years of neglect, control was suffocating, decisions framed as spiritual when they were in fact selfish, and behind it all, women like Janelle and Christine were forced to either crumble or fight back. The cruise ship sighting of Janelle and the raw revelations of Christine's memoir are not random moments. They are twin chapters in a larger story: the collapse of the Brown Empire, the unmasking of its rotten core, and the emergence of women who will no longer be silent. For years viewers watched, some admiring, some skeptical, but now the truth is undeniable. The Brown family was never a haven of faith. It was a stage for manipulation, favoritism, and betrayal. And as the dust continues to settle, the question grows sharper. What becomes of those still entangled in Kody and Robyn's web? Will they cling to the illusion, folding laundry while their children suffer, or will they, like Janelle and Christine, finally step into the light of freedom? The tears, the laughter, the betrayals, and the resilience are all part of a drama that no scripted show could ever match. The truth has escaped the cage, and it will not be silenced again. The real problem with polygamy and the rise and fall of Robyn Brown. The cameras captured smiling faces, perfectly staged family dinners, and carefully crafted testimonies about faith, unity, and love. But behind the lens, there was always a silent truth that could not be denied. The system of polygamy itself was the real villain, not any one wife or even Kody Brown alone. For years, sister wives presented audiences with a carefully orchestrated illusion, making it seem as though jealousy, conflict, and bitterness were simply flaws in the women themselves. Viewers were encouraged to believe that if only the wives could be kinder, less emotional, and more submissive, the system would work. Yet reality kept breaking through the facade. The fights, the tears, the silent resentment, all of it revealed a deep fracture, not just between the women, but within the very foundation of plural marriage. And at the center of that fracture was Robyn Brown, once the favored wife, who now finds herself trapped by the very role she once fought to win. From the very beginning, the Brown family sold a dream. They told the world that polygamy was not about control or male privilege, but about community, love, and eternal family bonds. The narrative sounded noble, even utopian, but in practice, the women were forced into a competition they could never win. Their natural human emotions, especially jealousy, were painted as weakness, even sin. A wife who felt threatened or insecure was told to pray harder, to love more, to sacrifice her ego. What this did was strip women of their agency, gaslight them into silence, and uphold a system where their suffering was rebranded as spiritual growth. The husbands, especially Kody, were framed as central figures whose needs, whims, and even failures were excused as part of the divine order. The truth is devastating. Polygamy is not sustainable because it is built on inequality, and inequality breeds resentment. Consider how the show continually misdirected its audience. Instead of questioning whether the system itself was flawed, the storyline often cast wives as villains. Christine was portrayed as too emotional, Janelle as too independent, Mary as too cold, and eventually even Robin as too manipulative. The conflict was always framed as the women failing each other, but the deeper question, why should women be forced to share a husband in the first place, was left unasked. It was classic misdirection, a sleight of hand that kept viewers focused on the wrong problem. And this is where the cruelty of the system is most apparent. It convinces not just the participants, but also the audience, that the suffering is their own fault, that if only they were stronger, more obedient, or more loving, everything would be fine. But the cracks became too wide to cover. Christine's exit shattered the myth of unity. Janelle's rebellion exposed the hypocrisy of Kody's control. Even Mary, long the most loyal, finally walked away. And through it all, Robin Brown stood at Kody's side, believing that she had won the great competition. She became the legal wife, the favorite, the one with all the access and attention. Yet what looked like victory soon revealed itself as a curse, because what Robin really won was Kody, and Kody, as years of manipulation, favoritism, and neglect proved, was not a prize at all. Robin's rise was calculated. From the moment she entered the family, she positioned herself not as just another wife, but as Kody's soulmate. She flattered him, she deferred to him, and she played the long game by highlighting the weaknesses of the other wives. She didn't have to tear them down directly. She simply emphasized their flaws in Kody's presence, subtly widening the gap between him and the others. It was a slow, deliberate form of relational control, a kind of emotional chess where every move was about consolidating her place as the one true wife. Kody, eager for adoration and validation, fell for it completely. Soon, Robin became not only his favorite, but his justification. He began neglecting his other wives in favor of Robin, using the conflict as proof that they were unrighteous or disobedient. But time has a way of stripping illusions bare. As Robin ages, as her children grow older, and as Kody himself spirals into bitterness, the so-called rewards of her manipulation are turning to ash. She is left with a man who has alienated most of his family, who has driven away wives and children alike, and who now leans entirely on her. What once looked like privilege now looks like isolation. The attention she craved has become suffocation. The victory she celebrated has turned into entrapment. Robin is now the sole bearer of Kody's frustration, his paranoia, his obsession with control. In the end, she may find herself more trapped than any of the wives who left, because she has tied her entire identity to him. And this, perhaps, is the greatest irony of all. The system that forced women into endless rivalry did not just destroy unity, it also destroyed the so-called winner. Polygamy promised Robin status, love, and security. What it delivered was a hollow marriage, a resentful husband, and the loneliness of standing on a throne made of ashes. When we step back and look at the entire timeline, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. From the earliest episodes to the most recent interviews, the story of the Brown family is not one of wives who couldn't get along. It is the story of a system that was doomed from the start, a system built on control, on gaslighting, on spiritualized inequality. Jealousy was not the wives' weakness, it was evidence that polygamy itself is unworkable. Robyn's fall is not simply the tragedy of a manipulative woman who got what she wanted, it is the inevitable collapse of a structure that was always destined to fail. And as the dust settles, viewers are left not with the image of a united eternal family, but with a cautionary tale of how illusion, control, and manipulation can tear people apart from the inside out. Solomon Brown's painful fall from golden child to forgotten son in the polygamy collapse. The heartbreaking silence inside the Brown household is not caused by cameras shutting down or children growing older. It is the silence of neglect, favoritism, and emotional abandonment. Once celebrated as the golden boy of Robyn and Kody Brown's union, young Solomon was paraded before the cameras as a symbol of love and unity. He was cherished, praised, and protected. But today, that same boy has faded into the shadows, eclipsed by the arrival of his younger sister Ariella, whose presence has absorbed every ounce of attention and parental energy. What was once adoration has turned into invisibility, and this invisibility is not just an ordinary stage of growing up. It is the product of parental manipulation, biased choices, and a toxic system that has systematically destroyed bonds between siblings, parents, and children. The story of Solomon Brown is not only a tale of one child's loneliness, but also a mirror reflecting the devastating cost of favoritism in a family already torn apart by polygamy. The central theme here is painfully clear. Children should never have to compete for love, yet in the Brown household, competition has always been at the core. From wives fighting for Kody's approval to children silently begging for scraps of affection, the pattern is unmistakable. Solomon's decline from favorite son to forgotten figure is not random. It is the direct outcome of a system where attention is currency, and Kody and Robyn spend it carelessly, without considering the long-term scars they are leaving behind. Favoritism is not merely bad parenting, it is a form of control, a subtle weapon that divides children against each other and leaves them questioning their own worth. In the early days, Solomon's arrival was treated almost as a divine gift. He was Robyn's first child with Kody, the proof that their union was more than emotional, it was biological. Cameras lingered on his face, Robyn clung to him, and Kody showered him with a kind of obsessive adoration that was painfully absent from his other children. For a while, it seemed Solomon would be raised in the glow of endless praise. But then came Ariella. From the moment she was born, the spotlight shifted. Suddenly Solomon was no longer the baby, no longer the miracle. He became background noise, a child living in the shadow of his younger sister. What might have been natural sibling dynamics was made worse by Robyn's open favoritism and Kody's compulsive need to turn Ari into the new family mascot. Solomon's once constant place in their arms was quietly erased, leaving him stranded in emotional limbo. The isolation was not just within his immediate household. Unlike Kody's older children, many of whom formed bonds with siblings across households, Solomon was kept apart. He was not given the same opportunities to connect, to play, to build a web of relationships beyond Robyn's walls. Robyn, fiercely protective of her bubble, insisted on drawing lines that separated her children from the rest of the family. In doing so, she deprived Solomon of what could have been healing connections, especially at a time when his parents' attention was dwindling. The result is a boy growing up lonely, watching from the margins as his sister absorbs the affection that was once his lifeline. And the problem does not end with the younger children. The older Brown children, already estranged from Kody, are witnesses to this cycle of favoritism and neglect. They have spoken publicly about the pain of being abandoned by their father in favor of Robyn's household. For them, Solomon's story is a haunting replay of their own childhoods, of being told they mattered less, of watching their father choose sides, of realizing that love was conditional. The cycle of rejection repeats, and Solomon becomes yet another victim of Kody's warped system of priorities. Instead of bridging generational divides, Kody and Robyn have widened them. Instead of building unity, they have fractured their family into isolated islands of favoritism, resentment, and mistrust. This pattern reveals the darker psychology at play. Favoritism is not accidental, it is a form of control. By elevating one child over another, by shifting attention dramatically from Solomon to Ari, Robyn and Kody reinforce a system where love is something to be earned, something fragile, something always at risk of being taken away. This breeds insecurity, a kind of gaslighting that makes children question whether they are truly loved or whether they somehow caused their own neglect. And for Solomon, who once knew what it felt like to be adored, the contrast is devastating. The fall from favored child to forgotten one leaves deeper scars than if he had never been favored at all. Timeline after timeline confirms the collapse. Early episodes showed Kody doting on Solomon, holding him constantly, proclaiming his joy at this child of his soulmate. Years later, the footage is different. Solomon is quiet, often unseen, while Ari occupies the center of the frame. Meanwhile, Kody's older children cut ties, declaring publicly that they no longer feel they have a father. The disintegration of those relationships further isolates Solomon, who is left in a home where his father is present physically but absent emotionally, and where his mother's favoritism creates a suffocating hierarchy of affection. The boy who once symbolized love is now a casualty of neglect. And this is where the true tragedy emerges. The system that destroyed marriages is now destroying childhoods. The toxic dynamics of favoritism, gaslighting, and neglect are not just about the wives and their rivalries. They are seeping into the next generation, shaping children like Solomon and Ari in ways that will echo for decades. What began as Kody's obsession with control has become a cycle of emotional abandonment, ensuring that the fractures of today will become the traumas of tomorrow. The Brown family's story has always been framed as a cautionary tale about polygamy, but what is unfolding now is even darker. It is not simply about wives being neglected, it is about children, the most innocent victims, being discarded and sidelined as pawns in their parents' game. Solomon's decline into loneliness is not just a sad family drama, it is proof that neglect can be as destructive as outright abuse. The silence in his life is not peace, it is emptiness. The invisibility he suffers is not natural, it is engineered.